Janelle is a transformation specialist, certified coach, a podcaster, and founder of the Limitless Experience. She spent 35 years in corporate, and in that part of her life, she led transformation and strategic execution. In her coaching practice, she supports high-performing professional women to get clear on what success looks like in the next chapter of their working life and what it's going to take for them to achieve that success so they build careers and lives they love. Okay, Nell, I'm so happy to have you here. So you run a program called the Limitless Experience, a mastermind. How many years have you been running that for?
It's been running in its current format now for 2 years, two
2
full
years.
years, and so super excited about that. We run a wait list now, and it's filled out for the last 2 years fully booked, and this time I'm running 2 different pods of it as well. So
Ew.
it's growing and growing.
It's so good. Okay, so there was a really specific reason I wanted you on the show, not just because I love you, but also because you know corporate women, I think, better than most people, maybe even more than anyone I know, for a couple of reasons. You yourself have been in corporate, you just told me 35 years. I was going to say like 30 plus. You're in a very senior leadership position in corporate, and you, I know, still have that role alongside your coaching because it means that you have this flavor of like deeply understanding your clients in a way that others don't. And, I just want you to be able to talk to the nuance of when we're targeting corporates in particular, because if we're running masterminds for corporates, it's super different to running like B2C experiences, right? Like, first off the cuff, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Ah, so many thoughts, and we could go anywhere with this today, Ali, I think, because for me, I found masterminds through my business.
Yes.
And I'd been in one on one coaching for a long time. And then I joined your mastermind, of course. And I just couldn't believe how valuable the community, the group, just learning off each other was. And the thing that really struck me is that while men have this in corporate, so there are lots of masterminds for men in corporate,
Wow.
there are very few masterminds for women in corporate. And so for me, it was something that I got so much value out of, and I could see that women could get value out of it, but there just weren't the masterminds there for women to go into.
Yes.
Then what I found though is because they weren't there, women didn't really know, corporate women really didn't know what to do with the mastermind concept and whether they wanted to be a part of it or whether one on one was going to be better for them. And so I've had lots of conversations around the value of masterminds for women in
Yes.
corporate, but also then had to really think about how you attract women into a space that they really know nothing about.
And so, how do you communicate that to somebody who you're trying to demonstrate ROI to somebody who works in corporate? They're not B2B, it's B2C. Like, how do you communicate that to them when you yourself know how valuable it is, but they're just like, I want one to one?
Yeah, it's one of the things is it's growing as we've gone along because women are actually referring each other now. So I
Yes.
think once they get in, and even recently, we've just taken in a new March intake. And after the first call, one of the women messaged me and said, finally get what you mean about the community now. And
Mm,
so I think they feel it as soon as they get in there. But of course, corporate women, still a competitive environment,
yes.
still a guarded environment for many women. I think it's changed. It's certainly changed over the 35 years I've been in corporate. But there's still that competitiveness or that feeling that you can't show yourself, the feeling that you can't be vulnerable. And so, of course, stepping into a group space can feel quite scary. So, I talk a lot about the safety of the community. I talk about the value of being able to hear other women's stories. I talk about the fact that we're not all that different when we get into those sessions, because despite whatever industries we're in, we're usually facing into the same sort of issues. We're facing into the corporate politics. We're facing into difficult conversations. We're facing into again, less so, but still oftentimes being the only woman in the room. So, whilst we feel like it's only us, it's really good when we get into community and understand that there's something there for everyone.
And do you find that, like, because I imagine that competitive piece that you spoke about just now, my instant thought is like, that's just conditioning and patriarchal thinking, and it's not actually how they truly feel when they're in the room. Like, is that true? Or do you feel like you have to break it out of some people?
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay.
It's a feeling, and when they get
Yes.
in there, you should see how quickly they open up when they're
Okay.
given the opportunity. So
Yes.
I think it's almost a narrative
Yep.
that's been built in. It's a narrative that we're taught to believe almost, or we
Yes.
think we should believe. Then when we get into it in the real world, we find that it's actually a really, really good experience.
Yes. Okay. So I know though, and like you would be humble in sharing this, but I know that anytime somebody comes in and they're vulnerable and they show up and they're open, that's a sign of good space holding. So I'm sure that anyone listening who runs programs, works with corporates would be dying to know this as well. Like, what are you actually doing in those first sessions to create that space, create that vulnerability?
I think a lot of it has come from me being vulnerable first. And
Yes.
so, me sharing some of those stories and my experiences on Instagram, on LinkedIn in particular, and
Yes.
actually putting my own stories out there about how I feel, what happened to me today, what still
Yes.
happens, how I feel about it, and also then sharing client stories is the first thing I'd say. Then the second thing I'd say is when we get into session and where we actually have the conversations about this is a safe space, this is why it's a safe space. I set it up to be
Yeah.
exactly that. And then the third thing is the most value comes when they share. And so if I can share first, I can put that out there, they can see me sharing. They almost just come into the conversation, but I've got to be the one that goes first. I've got to lead it for others to feel like it's a safe space to go.
I feel like what you just described, like for anyone listening, that sounds so obvious, but it's actually not the going first thing. I constantly remind myself of that. And if ever I have times inside my masterminds where I'm like, people aren't sharing their realness right now, it's almost always a finger point back to me of like, where are you not being real and open and honest? And so, for anyone that is listening, it's like, yeah, if you do work with corporate women in particular, what does it look like for you to share openly and honestly first to create that environment where they can do that too?
Yeah, and it's no different to your masterminds, the business
Totally.
masterminds. I think everybody feels vulnerable in some sense or another. I think it's just more common
Yes.
for entrepreneurs or coaches or consultants to be in that mastermind space.
Yes.
It's that would be the only difference though, because I would
Yes.
agree people would still feel vulnerable, and I think you would still have your stories to tell
Definitely.
there.
Definitely. And the other thing I really love that you shared is like those guardrails, like really setting up safety from the start. So asking yourself that question of what does safety look like? And this comes back to good onboarding, right? Like being really, really clear in your onboarding experience. Like, what does that look like? So are there any other practical things? I imagine you're giving them information from the start around, yeah, like safe space. That means it's confidential. Is there anything else you're sharing there?
Again, as it's grown, because have been so many referrals, and I'll talk about a little bit. I'd
Yeah.
love to talk about how
Yes.
we have started to market this
Yes.
because as it's grown, it's almost become by invitation only.
Yeah, great.
But what that's meant is that there's connections
Yes.
between the women, and that was something I really had to think about because I was like, oh, hang on, we're not completely confidential now if somebody knows of somebody or might know their workplace or women from
Yes.
common workplaces coming in. So I really had to think about that in the onboarding and think about that in the
Yeah.
conversations and have conversations with the women directly about what they're prepared to share, what names I can use, whether I need to keep things quite neutral or just talk about person
Yes.
A if nobody wants to name names or things like that. So, really had to be quite conscious of
Yes.
creating that space and making sure that they felt safe to share.
Because once that trust is broken, it's broken.
Oh, yeah, and you won't get it back.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing, I had one group that, for whatever reason, just had so many deep and important stories. So we'd had child loss. We'd had
Yes.
child loss by suicide. We'd had
Ugh.
We'd had some mental health issues. We'd had some really deep things happen, and we had breast cancer, and
Mm.
all in one group. And so then the conversations about, all right, exactly what do you want to share here? Because whilst we're talking about corporate life and we're talking about careers and we're talking about next levels, you can't do that in a bubble. And
Yes.
so everybody brings their whole self to work one way or another, whether they realize it or not. And so when we got to that space, I was wondering how women were going to be prepared to share. And it was interesting because it only took a week or two before those stories actually came out.
Yeah,
And then the
wow.
conversations were so much deeper. But
Yes.
I've got to be prepared that even if I know the story, I I've got to hold the story until the mastermind participant, until my women are ready to share them.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, yeah, I often think about it as like, I will be a vault in whatever way I need to
Yeah.
be. And as you say, knowing that it's then up to them. And I imagine that that's a real key piece for you is holding that duality of being like, I know so much behind the scenes one to one here.
Yeah. And I think because many of my clients were one-to-one first, and then I brought
Yes.
them in because obviously for me, I'm still full-time in corporate, and then my coaching practice has grown and grown and grown. But that's meant that I've been able to do less one-on-one than I did
Yes.
originally, and so the masterminds become the primary way for me to coach now, and that's meant that one-on-one clients have come into the space,
Yes.
and so that's meant that I've got a lot of background. And the question, "How much are you willing to share here?" has become
Yes.
a question that I've started to ask.
Yeah,
I find
great.
myself asking that all of the time. "How much are you ready to share? How much do you want to share here?"
Yes.
Uh,
How permission giving.
and interestingly, they go there. I think you
Yes.
give them the permission and then they feel ready. And
Yes.
that seems to happen faster and faster as retentions started to
Yes.
grow now. So as I have more women in the space more often.
Yeah. I mean, that creates more trust as well for everyone because if you're speaking to new intakes and you're like, hey, these people have been here for a long time, new women are going to go, okay, there's obviously a reason they're staying. So it just perpetuates like that circle of trust, right?
And that's certainly one thing that I've found with the mastermind is it started slowly, but then it feels like it's got a snowball effect as
Yes.
more women stay and then more women want to join the space. And so that's been something I don't know why I didn't expect it, but I didn't
Yes.
expect it. And now it's like, oh, here we go. It's almost organically growing now,
Yeah.
which is lovely.
It starts to become its own organism,
Yeah.
right? Like it really, and that's, it's like any asset, any business product, it's just going to start to really take on that life of its own. If you market it effectively, consistently to the right person with the right message, even if it ebbs and flows over time.
Yeah, and I guess you see that all of the
Yeah.
time. It's only just occurred to me, but as you and I have
Yes.
discussed before, there's so many things that I go, oh, of course it would do that
Yeah.
because I know it in my business life, but applying that to my coaching life's always been a bit like,
Yes.
oh, surprise, it does the
Yeah.
same thing.
Totally. Okay. So I want to know whether you use the word mastermind.
Mhm.
And we just spoke about this really briefly off air, which I thought was interesting because a lot of people who have your ideal client don't use the word mastermind. You kind of do. Tell us more.
Yeah, they don't use the word mastermind, I think, because of that lack of resonance
Yeah.
in the space, in that corporate space. But I actually deliberately use the word mastermind, and deliberately so, because I want to start getting that language out into the
Mm,
wild. The reason that we don't use the word is that lack of resonance that we talked about
yes.
at the start of the episode, but I now use the words hybrid mastermind and group coaching program.
Mm,
And it is just a mastermind, Ellie.
yeah.
Like the group coaching, it's unless there's like a topic that everybody has brought up or there is something specific that I've seen in the community that I want to start a session with where I will coach the group, if you like, for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. There might be a smidge of group coaching, but mostly it is purely mastermind, hot seat, where people come in, bring whatever's happening for them into the session. So it
Yes.
is a mastermind. And one day I would really like to get it to just be marketed as the limitless experience, the mastermind for corporate women.
Okay, so I love this so much because there's two things you're obviously doing here. You're recognizing the whole marketing premise of call it what your people would call it. And also you're like, I really want to revolutionize this industry a little bit more and change the face of this. So it's like I'm willing to meet you halfway. So I love that approach. Okay, what about how people are paying? Like, are they using their L&D budgets? Are they paying just completely on their own money? If they are ever using L&D budgets, are they like, are you helping them to get that? Like, what does that look like?
I have only ever had women in corporate have their employers pay for coaching when it's one-on-one.
Yes.
So
Interesting.
every single woman is investing in themselves, which excites me so much in a way
Yes.
that they would invest in their growth in a mastermind they're on their own. So I find it really interesting that I have helped women use L&D or development budgets for the one-on-one, but I've never been asked for the
Yes.
mastermind. And so
Yes.
it's a real switch on that. And to be honest though, really probably only 25% of my clients would have had their employers pay. I think
Yes.
there is a shift for women to start investing in their careers and seeing that need. And I think that comes from the fact that, let's be honest, there's lots of programs for women in corporate that really don't hit the mark. And I also think that when they choose it and invest in themselves, they go and look for something that's quite different to what we're normally given in corporate, which
Yes.
for me is so cookie cutter. And, people who know my story know that I didn't do a lot of those programs and actually pitched my employer for my own coach. So it was, I think it lines up probably for women who think more like me rather than expecting the employer to deliver what they think it is women need.
And I would imagine that when a woman's paying out of her own budget, she's coming into the experience naturally thinking about it really holistically. So she's coming in going, this is a very 360 experience for me where I'm going to come in and get whatever I want. There's no thoughts of this is corporate money, this has to benefit my employer. Like, I wonder whether there's a correlation there between, well, of course, they're going to be more vulnerable and actually get to the root of things if they're paying for their own money because they're actually looking at it through their own lens and putting themselves first, probably for the first time in their lives for many of them.
Well, and I think the other thing too is that often they're looking for the next level or the next role or the
Yeah.
exit or the transition or the something that's not necessarily going to serve, if you like,
Yes.
their existing employer. And I think that drives something quite different as well. And they look for something different if they're in that space. And I guess the other thing I would say for anyone who does similar coaching to me, my women are seasoned and high
Yes.
performing already. And
Yes.
so I think there's that difference between when you're earlier in your career
So
and looking for
true.
those foundational pieces versus high performer, already done a whole bunch of things, but still looking for the what's next.
Yes.
I think it brings a different flavour to it.
And also, like, I think we also need to just speak to the obvious there is that they've got money to
Yeah.
spend.
Yes.
And this comes back to like you got to be smart when you're running a mastermind program. Like this is not essential spending. This is self-actualized spending. Like if we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they're fed, they're clothed, they're sheltered. They've got, their life needs covered to have a privileged enough life that they can go, yes, this is the
Yeah.
thing that is me actually looking at my development. And I think that you've been so smart about that. We're like, well, of course, like I'm not going to run a business where I'm
Yeah.
marketing to people who don't have the money to spend here. And, oftentimes I'll see again with this market, where I see it work most effectively is where people get that niche really right. They market to the person who's got the money to spend and or they're marketing, if they are marketing to someone earlier stages of corporate, it's like very strategic around, yeah, does it come from a development budget? And if so, how can I really position it in that way where they can take it to their employer? Sometimes it might even be having two sales pages, one that's like
Yeah.
direct to consumer, one that's direct to boss. So it's really smart that you're doing that because, like, duh. And also, a lot of people don't.
Yeah. And I think for me, I understand that coaching is a luxury
Yeah.
in that sense, especially when again, my women, the women that come to me, they've usually got kids,
Yes.
whether primary school age, high school age. You know that the outlays are there, but they still want to develop themselves, and so they're choosing to come into the space. So they're
Yes.
usually choosing to come into the space with a specific outcome that they're looking for. And if I was going to categorize those outcomes, it's I'm new in a role, I've just taken on another really big role. How am I going to land that without feeling the
Yes.
imposter syndrome and all of those things? So I've got a pod at the moment that's exclusively that. So
Yeah.
we have some
Wow.
really deep conversations there. Or the other one is I've been in a role for a long time. I know I want something more, but what is it? And so, they're really specific needs that we're
Yes.
addressing there as well. So first of all, they're at that point in their career, and then they want something, and
Yes.
they know that they need help to get it because they would have
Yes.
been able to work it out themselves if it was, that simple.
You're helping them solve very specific, high value problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, well, on that note, let's talk selling and marketing. So you mentioned before that this has become somewhat by invitation obsessed. Love it. Tell us about how, just, yeah, overview, like how do you market and sell this program?
If I was going to say the biggest thing that sticks in my brain all of the time is the fortunes in the follow up. And so
Yes.
when I say by invitation, I think I have many, many women on the outside, and I'm sure all coaches are the same. There's lots of
Yes.
women watching and wanting, I think, or desiring to be a part of it or wondering what it's like, but then wondering if it's for them. And I
Yes.
think one of the things about, group, mastermind, any language you want to put around it, is that thought of, is it going to be right for me? Am I going to fit in? Am I at the right level? Am I clever enough? This was a
Yes.
question I got from a high performing lawyer
Yep.
asking if she was going to be clever enough to be in a mastermind space. I think it's just that natural piece though around, will I be at the right level if I'm in this room? And so what I found is that actually following up, actually messaging, calling, whatever the right thing is, having coffees with women and saying, look, this space would be perfect for you and I'd love to
Yes.
invite you in, has tended to be the really powerful way in terms of closing the sales. In terms
Yes.
of marketing, all of the things, Ali, that I think you'd expect. So Instagram and LinkedIn are the two spaces that I would be talking about my coaching the most.
Yeah. And
Uh,
you do your attraction stuff.
yeah,
So,
plus the
yeah.
podcast, all of those sort of
Yes.
things. But that, I think, being invited into a space for corporate women, um, at least has worked really well from my
Totally.
perspective.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think something you do really well is you consistently have your long and long and short form platforms that you market on. You've done so consistently. You're really consistent in your message. Obviously, because it is that smaller space, your sales funnels are like smaller. You're not doing big, consistent, like weekly events because you just don't need to for the return on that type of program, but you know you could ramp up.
I could. And I think part of that's just I don't have the time. So
Totally.
between the big job, all the travel that I want to do, all of the things that I want to do in my life, plus the coaching, I've got to be anything I do in marketing and selling just has to work.
Yep.
And because, I'd love to do more of the events, I'd like to do more webinars, I'd like to do all of those things, but the time constraint just means that I can't. So,
Yeah.
one day there'll be more space.
Well, it's so cool because what I hear, I know you're somebody who has a very big role. You're a very successful woman and you've chosen to run this mastermind. And I know that even though it is something that is deeply led by passion and mission for you, you wouldn't be doing it if it also wasn't highly profitable. And that I think is just like a really amazing reminder that it's like this business model is so effective.
It's, as I said, I think masterminds for me have been transformative in two ways. So, first
Yeah.
of all, I went into a mastermind and I was like, oh, wow. And I've not gone back to one on one coaching. So,
Yeah.
that's for me personally. But then for my business and for my women, it's
Yes.
the only way I can scale. It means that I can support so many more women with the time that I have available, and they get the benefits as well.
Totally.
Like, it's not just win-win, it's win-win-win.
Yeah.
I think for, it's, yeah, as you know, I'm a big
Yeah.
fan. Big
It's
fan of
true.
masterminds.
Okay, I like haven't checked my notes once and
No,
I've just
you
like
have
rolled
not.
through all the things with you, which is my favorite way to do this. Is there anything I've missed out that you feel is like important to add to this conversation around for anyone that's listening when it comes to supporting, corporate women, this type of client to run a mastermind inside your business?
I think just for any career coaches out there like myself or any other coaches that are working with corporate women, I think just continuing to have the conversation about the fact that masterminds are something that have been around forever. We seem to be the last group or cohort of
Mm,
humans to decide to jump on board with this. And so I think it's just a continual education about the value of it and about the fact that these spaces can be incredibly safe and that
yes.
they can deliver big benefits. And as I said, now that I'm starting to see women returning and returning again, we know that, they're taking value from it. And it's interesting because it it's evolving as well. And what I mean by that is some of the women are now coming back to, well, how can I build something on the side of my career? Or how can I do
Yes.
things? So it's evolving even as it grows. So yeah, have the conversations, do the education, and yeah, keep talking about masterminds would be what I would say.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you for your massive, amazing work in the world and for your time today. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much. It has been such a joy.